So over the past few years with the New York Post and SNY Digital Partnership, we've brought you videos about some of the greatest moments in New York sports history. Today, I have the pleasure of talking about some of those moments with a 5-time Emmy Award-winning New York sports producer and author of a new book titled The 20 Greatest Moments in New York Sports History, Our Generation of Memories from 1960 to Today. Joining me in studio, the one and only Todd Erhlich. Todd, what's going on, man?
Dude, it's great to be here, Dexter. Appreciate the time, man.
Well, I'm happy to have you here. So excited about this book, and I've had the chance to read it, to look at it, to digest it. Now I have you here to talk about it. So I want to get right into it because you wrote this book with longtime New York sports writer Gary Myers. We know, you know this, sports fans, they love history. They love this. But for you, what was the inspiration in terms of writing this book? Why did you write this book?
So it was really interesting. So my dad was taking me to the train station. We were running a little bit late. So I go, running into the bookstore. I grabbed 2 books just by the color, slapped down my credit card. I run to the train. I made the train, happy to tell you. So I'm sitting down, and I open up the book, and it dawns on me, sports is hyper-local. Fans love their teams more than anything. And I started thinking, I'm so lucky that I was executive producing shows at CBS at the time, and I knew a lot of these superstar athletes that made these moments. I had their numbers and personal relationships, and I thought about sports. And sports is the one thing that really galvanizes communities, because if you think about it, these games and championships are shared experiences. Whether you're at the game or watching on SNY, for example, reading about the Post, it's happening live and people are sharing it. So now people think back to their greatest moments in their life. A lot of it is these championships and these great sports moments. So I thought to myself, if I could write a book, utilize all my contacts, it could be a really interesting book with unique stories that nobody else can offer. And I did over 100 interviews with some of these athletes, broadcasters, and writers that covered these events. And my favorite thing that they said to me is, Todd, I'm going to give you a story I've never told anybody else.
And that's the thing that you loved about this. Well, it's funny because we were talking about this before we started taping, right? It's just how much work goes into writing a book that I think sometimes people in the audience don't realize, right? So much work goes into this, and you did such a great job. 100 interviews, you and Gary Myers doing that together. You talked about sports galvanizing communities, Todd. And there's a power in sports and how it impacts people. You had David Tyree, Giants fans know him, obviously. He wrote the foreword in this book, and he talked about the power of sports. Can you tell us about what he was able to share with the readers in that foreword?
Well, I mean, David Tyree, he's really one of the great people that is in my life. I'm honored to say that he's a friend. He's just a great person, a solid citizen. What wasn't great for him was the Friday practice before the Super Bowl. And everybody knows that that's simply a dress rehearsal. Everything's got to be buttoned up at that point, right? So he goes through the Friday practice. He called it the worst practice he ever had. Amani Toomer told me he couldn't catch a cold during that practice. People know that Eli Manning won 2 Super Bowls, should be in the Hall of Fame. He should be in the Hall of Fame, people, and it's going to be with those 2 Super Bowls over Brady. What they don't know, because he was quiet, is what a leader he was. So he went up to Tyree after that practice, and he said, you know what, David, you're a gamer. I know you're going to be ready. And both Tyree and Eli told me that. Then in the game, Eli told me on the play there was the helmet catch. He was scrambling around, and he said, if you don't trust your guys, you'll hesitate. Think about if he hesitated on that pass. It's intercepted. The Giants never win. The Super Bowl, he doesn't hit plaques for the touchdown. They don't do the defensive stop, and they don't stop the Patriots from going undefeated and winning a Super Bowl. So he trusted him. He put it up there. Tyreek came up with the single greatest moment in Super Bowl history with the helmet catch. So I asked him, I said, David, I'm sure that every day somebody comes up to you and asks you about the helmet catch. Are there any stories that stand out to you? And he said, yes. He said, Todd, one fan came up to me and he said, you know what? Our grandfather was sadly on his deathbed. They gave him less than a month to live. We all wanted to watch the Super Bowl together because we were huge Giant fans. He said the joy that he got from watching the helmet catch and seeing the Giants win, he lived another 6 months, And the grandson and the family credited that championship with extending his life, or at least they perceived it to extend his life through the joy that he got and the joy that the family got. And Tyree said it's the most humbling thing that anybody has ever said to him. And so that's the power of sports, and it was just so touching that he was willing to share that story.
Yeah, it was beautiful that he was able to share that in the forward for this book, and I think it really does speak to the power of sports in that, and I'm glad it touched David Tyree in a way to also share it with other people, and hopefully it touched them in that way. In this book, you've got a couple of football memories, right? And I want to start, we just talked about the Giants, so let's go back to the Giants. And we talk about their first Super Bowl that they won. What makes that first Super Bowl win for the Giants such a good moment or good place in history in terms of New York sports?
So it's like a lot of the moments in the book. Long-suffering fan base. It had been 30 years since the Giants had won a championship, and they had never won a Super Bowl. So they go into Super Bowl 21. Sims, 22 for 25, probably the greatest performance ever by a quarterback in a Super Bowl. Phil McConkey catches a touchdown pass. So Phil told me he had two dreams in life. One was to be a pilot. The second was to win a Super Bowl championship. So he was a little guy, petite, if you will. So McConkey goes, you know what? I'm going to go for the pilot thing first. Joins the Navy, plays football there, becomes a pilot, comes out. At 27, he goes, I'm going to go after my other dream. Makes the Giants, as I just said, scored a touchdown in the Super Bowl. So there he is standing on the sidelines, and he's watching the clock. 3, 2, 1. His second dream comes through. He goes running out onto the field, and he's behind Sims, right? And he looks down, and he sees a .355 Magnum. So he picks it up, and his military training kicks in, and he keeps it focused to the ground to keep it safe. A security guard comes up, takes the gun from him. In the post-game press conference, the guys, came up to him. They said the CBS switchboard lit up. People were like, what is McConkey doing with a gun in his helmet, right? So his answer was, let's see, played in a Super Bowl, scored a touchdown, won a championship, and saved some lives. All in a day's work, he said.
All in a day's work there. See, that's
pretty good.
See, those are the stories behind the stories that sometimes people don't know or
right.
don't get. I want to move on because we got a lot of other great stuff to talk about. But in the second chapter of this book, I think this one's got to be a lock for one of the greatest moments in New York sports history. It had to be there. You had the Jets winning Super Bowl III. What are some of the stories around that moment? I think everybody thinks about Broadway Joe, making the guarantee. Everybody thinks about that. But are there stories around the Jets winning that Super Bowl that people might not be aware of?
Yes, so it's really interesting. So going into that game, the Jets were so overconfident that Eubank stopped practice, called a team meeting, and said, listen, no bulletin board material, nothing. Don't talk about how well we're playing, how well we're going to play in the Super Bowl, because they were huge 19-point underdogs to the mighty Colts. The NFL had never won a championship yet going to Super Bowl III. So now, Thursday night, before the Super Bowl, Touchdown Club, the player of the year is named. It's Joe Namath. He didn't think he'd have to give a speech. He thought he was going to go up and just get a trophy. Goes up to the podium, and all of a sudden, from the back of the room, somebody yells out, hey, Namath, we're going to kick your bleepity, bleepity, bleep. There was 3 bleeps. So Namath said, a little anger came out. And he said, you know what, Todd? Here's the thing. I was raised by 3 older brothers. I was taught never, ever pat yourself on the back. Bear Bryant, at my first meeting in Alabama, the legendary Bear Bryant, told him, if you think you can't, you won't. And Namath said to me, that's true with everything in life. If you think you can't, you won't. Pretty cool. I never forgot that. So he's up there. He's a little bit angry. So he goes, you know what? We're going to win the game. I guarantee it. And he goes back to the table, and, Schmidt's there, Emerson Boozer, and they're like, what did you do, Joe? And he goes, don't you think we're going to win? They said, yeah. They go, well, we got to have Joe's back. They go out. They famously win Super Bowl III.
Yep.
He's running off the field, and you think about Joe Namath, right? Think about the pantyhose, the women, the carousing, the fur coats, the white shoes. But he was, at heart, a humble guy, as he said to me. He's running off the field. He looks up in the stands. He sees all these Jet fans, and they're going like this. He goes, Yeah, we're number one. He goes, that's what was going through my head. It was just joy and ecstasy that he made it. And so I thought getting a little insight into the persona of Joe Namath was really interesting.
I think it's interesting. You know what else I take from that, Todd? I want to know about the man who said the bleepity bleeps to him. He has to, if he was a Colts fan, he's obviously going for the Colts. He's got to feel bad that he inspired that man to go and beat him that day.
That's right. He should have kept his trap shut.
He probably should have. He probably should have done that.
You don't have something nice to say, don't say anything at all. That's what my mom taught me.
There you go. Those are good words to live by there. Let's talk about some baseball in this book.
Yeah, man.
Because I learned something, and I read that some of the biggest home runs that we have seen in New York sports history were hit with the bats of teammates.
Yeah.
Right? Teammates using their other player on their team, their bat. Tell us more about that. Some people may know, some people may not know.
So Bucky Dent, 78, 14 games behind the Red Sox. They fight back, they fight back, they fight back. Boston Massacre. They tie him last day of the season. So what happens? There's a coin flip. It's going to be played in Fenway. So the light-hitting Bucky Dent is up there, down 2 runs. Mike Torres. He fouls the ball off of his shin. He wasn't wearing shin guards. It took almost 12 minutes for him to get it back together to get into the batter's box. Mickey Rivers says, hey, homie. That's what he always called him. Hey, homie, come here. Remember you asked to use my bat? He goes, yeah, whatever. So he takes the bat. Mickey goes, hey, there's a home run in it. Bucky's like just trying to get it together because he's in a lot of pain. He goes up. He goes, you know what? Torres is going to come inside on me. Whacks the home run. Puts them up 3-2. Yankees go on to win the World Series. Afterwards, Mickey Rivers came up to him and said, I told you it had a home run in it. Then Jim Leyritz, 1996. They're down 2-1 to Atlanta. You remember.
I do.
Your dad let you stay up late, right?
My dad let me stay up to watch it. My dad was a Yankees fan, let me stay up to watch that one. So I remember this game very well.
Nobody forgets when their dad lets them stay up late.
No, you don't.
That's what this book is about, bringing families together. But let me finish the story that you asked about. So they're down 3 runs, 5 outs to go, 8th inning. The king, Jim Leyritz, is going up to bat. He looks in the back rack. He's got 2 bats left. Mark Wohlers is on the mound. He's throwing 100 miles an hour. He's got to catch tomorrow. He's facing Smoltz. He can't afford to break another bat. Next to the bat rack, there's a box of brand new Mizuno bats. He looks in. It's Straw's bat. He goes, hey, Strawman, can I borrow one of your bats? He goes, sure. Gets up there, 86-mile-an-hour slider, boom, ties up the game. The Yankees go on. Instead of being down 3-1 and not winning the World Series, as I wrote in the book, Yankees dynasty never happens if they don't win the first World Series. They don't win the first World Series without that home run. And Leyritz says, I've watched it a million times. Everybody's high-fiving me. I grabbed Straw. I said, it was your bat. He said he hasn't shared that story with many people. It's another one of those great stories that's in the book. And he said, it's just like Bucky Dent's story. So I love that from the king.
That's a great one that I didn't know until reading a little bit before reading in your book, but recently. But that's a great one. Obviously an iconic, home run in World Series history, not just Yankees history, but World Series history. It's an iconic one there, too. I want to talk about some basketball, because this book, you have a chapter where you talk about what I think is one of the greatest moments in Knicks history.
Oh, yeah.
Game 7 of the 1970 NBA Finals between the Knicks and Lakers. What makes that game so special for New York fans? And Knicks fans out there know exactly what happened in that moment there, but is it the greatest moment in New York basketball history?
Oh, yeah.
You think so? Definitely?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, Dr. J. Duncan at Rutgers pretty good.
That's pretty good, too.
That's pretty darn good.
Yeah.
The doctor's pretty good.
Yeah.
But no, this is unequivocally the greatest moment. And again, long-suffering, die-hard fan base, the Knicks. This is their first ever championship. Game 5, the captain goes down. Somehow the team galvanized. They changed up their strategy. They won Game 5, but they lose Game 6, forcing Game 7. Nobody thought that the captain would come back. And Clyde said after Game 5, we don't win the championship without the captain. They come out for warm-ups, and Marv, who narrated that chapter for me, which was so gracious of him, told me that he interviewed Willis during the day because he was doing the radio show, and Willis said he was going to play, but Marv's looking at him, and like
he was not believing that at all.
No, he like had every treatment known to man, and he's still hobbling around and looked terrible. So Marv, from his perch, is looking down onto the court. No captain, no captain. All of a sudden, he said he heard the loudest sound he's ever heard in Madison Square Garden history to this day as the captain hobbles out. He said, and what was crazy is the Lakers stopped warming up. Jerry West, Wilt Chamberlain just stared at the captain as he walked out, took some shots. Frazier looked at them and said, we got him. We're going to win this game. So Frazier, one of the greatest Game 7 performances in NBA history, leads them. The captain hit 2 shots. That was enough to propel them to the lead in the championship. So they go on to win the championship. And one of the things I found interesting, because Clyde, from his tropical home, was kind enough to give me almost an hour interview. And I said to him, I said, Clyde, how'd you get the nickname? And he goes, well, I bought this hat with a wide brim. And back then, a thin brim was in. And Nate Bowman was giving me the business. The guys were giving me the business. 2 weeks later, Bonnie and Clyde comes out. He's wearing one of my hats. So Nate goes, you know what? You're smooth like Clyde. And you steal the basketball like they were bank robbers. He was Clyde from then on. And Clyde told me, he said, you know what? I know where folks know me from by what they call me. If they call me Walt, they know me from Atlanta or from college. If they call me Clyde,
from New York.
New York City.
There you go. Yeah, that's a good one right there, too.
It's a good one.
All right, we can't leave hockey out of this.
No.
Can't do that at all, right? We talked about the Namath guarantee.
Yeah, man.
But gotta ask you, what'd you learn about the other famous guarantee in New York sports? Everybody knows that is Mark Messier back in '94 with the Rangers. What'd you learn about that?
So I started each chapter with a headline, and I wrote sports guarantee. See Namath and Messier, because there's only 2 in the world, and both of them are right here. So I asked Mark, what made you do that? Because, again, back then, nobody made guarantees except for Ali. Nobody talked trash except for Ali, who's also in the book. So I said, what made you do that? He said, you know what? I believed in my guys, and I wanted my guys who hadn't won a Stanley Cup to believe in themselves. So I put it out there. I said, I guarantee we're going to win the game. So they're in a limo, going out to Game 6 to play the Devils. It's Glenn Anderson, Adam Graves, Richter, and Messier. And so Anderson tells me that he's got the papers. He looks on the back page. He's like, Mark, way to put extra pressure on us. And Mark said, you know what? I believe in you guys. And that's why I put my name on the line. It didn't hurt that he scored a natural hat trick in Game 6.
It did not.
It did hurt. So they forced Game 7.
Yep.
Game 7, Zelepukin, under 10 seconds to go, ties it up, goes into overtime. Stefan Matteau with the game winner. And what happened was Matteau told me that the craziest thing, and he said he never has told anyone this story. He gets the Stanley Cup in his hometown. He goes to his favorite hockey bar. There's a fan taking a picture with the Stanley Cup. He holds it over his head, and he looks to take a picture, and it snaps in half. He's holding 2 pieces of the Stanley Cup. Matteau said it came to him dinged up. They weren't doing anything that was irresponsible. They're holding 2 pieces of the Stanley Cup, the most famous trophy in all of sports. So a friend of his is a welder. He comes up to me, he goes, I'm going to take care of this. He disappears for 3 hours. He comes back. He goes, Stefan, 1 ring of welding would have done it. I did 4 rings. He said 10 years later, the same guy came up to him, and it was 1 o'clock in the morning. He said he called everybody he knew, had a huge party in his garage, everyone drinking out of the Stanley Cup. And he said he didn't even know it for a decade. And he said, Todd, that's for your book. And guys, this is for you. Buy the book. There's a lot of great stories like that in there.
That's a great one.
It's a good one.
I'm glad the Stanley Cup wasn't broken. They were able to put it back together.
Yeah,
that's a good story in itself there. Last thing for me, Todd, because there's so many great stories in this, right? And the book is out there now for New York sports fans to go and get. But I got to ask you this. What do you hope that you've accomplished in writing this book? And also, what do you think that readers will take from this book once they've actually experienced it?
Okay. So it's the 20 greatest moments in New York sports history. Available Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, where all good books are sold. If you buy the book, here's why I wrote it. times are tough, and I want to put a smile on people's faces. I got some stories that were dirt. I didn't put them in the book. And those are the type of stories that would have got headlines in the New York Post.
Right.
It would have gotten me more publicity because people trusted me and they gave me good stories. I want to do it. I wanted to write a feel-good book. I didn't want any dirt. So when you read this book, I want people to smile. And as you discussed, you read to your daughter every night.
Yep.
I want fathers and daughters. I got a 6-year-old son, fathers and sons, mothers and daughters, mothers and sons. I want families to get together. I want them to read a chapter at a time. I want them to learn New York sports history. I want them to smile, and then I want them to discuss it at the dinner table. So I want people to know their history, and I want people to feel good. And like I said, I worked really, really hard on this book. I'm very, very proud of it. And I think it'll make people happy if you buy it. And by the way, it makes a great holiday gift. I'm not going to lie. What a stocking stuffer.
Oh, no, this is a great stocking stuffer right here. I think it's a perfect time. That's why we were able to link up at this time. Yeah. And it's a really good book. And like I said, we here have talked so much about historic moments in New York sports here at the New York Post and SNY. So I think to have this put together in this book, the 20 greatest moments in New York sports history, out right now. Todd Erhlich, Gary Myers, great job, over 100 interviews. So if you want those stories behind the stories, that's the book for you to get. Todd?
Right there, that's the book.
Todd, that is the book. I want to say I appreciate you for coming through. I'm glad we're able to talk about this book. Looking forward to the next book. I'm probably putting pressure on you there. But I'm looking forward to the next one. I think this is a great one for the people. So thank you.
I appreciate you, Dexter. Known you a long time, and this means a lot. Thank you so much for having me on, and thank you for letting me share some of the stories. And I hope folks are inspired to go out and buy the book.
I hope they are. Like we said, it is a great holiday stocking stuffer. Go get that book right now, out by Todd Erhlich. Hope everybody enjoys it. And as always, enjoy the history and enjoy the sports.